Welcome to Sarah Wood's Tale. Where stories comes alive, please do well to hit that subscription button and turn on your notification bell for subsequent stories. The rain had just stopped over Lagos. The streets glistened under the afternoon sun, and the air smelled of wet dust and flowers. On the hill at the end of Victoria Island stood a mansion so large that people often slowed down just to stare. That mansion belonged to Mrs. Victoria Hayes. Inside, everything shone. The marble floor reflected the golden chandelier. The walls were decorated with paintings that cost more than most people earned in a year. Yet, behind all that beauty, the house felt cold, silent, empty. Victoria sat in her private lounge, dressed in a silk robe, her long earrings catching the light. She was in her late 40s but looked younger. Her skin was smooth, her posture perfect. She had built her fortune from nothing, starting as a salesgirl, then rising through smart deals and bold risks. People called her the Iron Lady of Lagos. But when the night came and the guests went home, she was just a woman with one secret that refused to die. She stared at a photo frame on the table. It showed a 17-year-old version of herself holding a small baby wrapped in a pink cloth. She whispered, almost to herself, "I wonder where you are now, my little girl." The memory hurt like a wound that never closed. Back then, she was poor and scared. Her parents had thrown her out when she got pregnant. She had no money, no place to stay. The baby's father had disappeared. In desperation, she left her newborn at the door of a church one rainy night and ran. Now, 23 years later, the guilt followed her like a shadow. A knock came on the door. "Madam, should I serve your lunch now?" It was Andrew, her middle-aged driver who also acted as her personal assistant. Victoria blinked and placed the photo face down. "No, Andrew. I'm not hungry." He hesitated. "Madam, you've not eaten since morning." "I said I'm not hungry," she snapped, then softened her voice. "Please, just leave me alone for a while." Andrew bowed slightly and left. He had worked for her long enough to know when to be silent. Moments later, her phone rang. It was her house manager, Mrs. Adele, calling from the downstairs kitchen. "Madam, the cleaning team is ready to start." And, the last maid, Esther, left without signing her release papers. Victoria's expression hardened. "Good riddance. I don't want to see that girl again." Mrs. Adele's tone dropped. "She says she didn't steal the bracelet." Victoria frowned. Of course she would say that. Thieves never admit to stealing. "Make sure the new recruitment is handled today. I can't stand dirty floors and lazy girls." "Yes, madam. I'll begin the interviews this evening." When the call ended, Victoria leaned back in her chair and stared out through the glass wall. Beyond the tall gates, she could see the city stretching endlessly, the noise, the traffic, the chaos. She had worked all her life to rise above that world. But what good was success when peace refused to come? That night, unable to sleep, she walked through the silent corridors of her mansion. Her heels echoed against the marble floor. Every corner sparkled, but the silence pressed on her chest. She entered her study, a large room with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and the faint smell of old perfume. In the center of her desk sat a small jewelry box. She opened it gently. Inside was a silver locket, heart-shaped, with faded initials engraved on it, V and B. She traced it with her fingers, whispering, "Victoria and baby. My only sin, and my only love." A single tear fell. She wiped it quickly before it could touch her cheek. The Iron Lady couldn't afford to look weak even in her own house. Outside, thunder rolled again. Somewhere in the city, a young woman was also staring at the same kind of sky, wishing for a chance. But for now, Victoria knew only her own loneliness and her own silence. She returned to her room, wrapped herself in her expensive blanket, and whispered a prayer she no longer believed in. "God, if she's alive, please keep her safe." Then she closed her eyes, not knowing that the answer to that prayer was already walking toward her life. The morning was bright and hot when Grace Miller arrived at the tall black gate of the Hayes mansion. Her clothes were simple, a clean white blouse and a long brown skirt, but her heart beat fast with hope. In one hand, she held a small brown envelope containing her recommendation letter from the orphanage where she grew up. In the other, she held her locket, an old, silver one she'd had since she was a baby. She always touched it when she was nervous. The guard looked her over. "You're here for the maid interview?" "Yes, sir," she said softly. He nodded and let her in. As she walked through the garden, her eyes widened. The place looked like a palace: roses, fountains, marble steps. She had never seen such wealth in her life. Inside, Mrs. Adele, a tall woman with a serious face, handed Grace a form. "Fill this out quickly. Madam doesn't like to wait." Grace nodded and filled in her details. Mrs. Adele glanced at the form. "You worked at the orphanage kitchen?" "Yes, Ma. For 6 years. I helped cook, clean, and take care of the younger ones." Mrs. Adele gave a small approving nod. We need someone hardworking. Madam is particular." Grace smiled politely. "I will do my best, Ma." "Good. Wait here. I'll call Madam." Grace sat on the edge of a leather sofa, clutching her envelope tightly. Her palms were sweating. She whispered a small prayer under her breath. "Dear God, please, let this be the beginning of something good. Please." After a few minutes, heavy footsteps echoed from the staircase. Victoria Hayes descended slowly, dressed in a cream-colored gown, her hair tied in an elegant bun. She looked every inch a queen. Grace immediately stood up, head slightly bowed. Victoria's eyes swept over the girl in front of her, humble, thin, but with a quiet dignity. There was something in those eyes. A softness. A familiarity she couldn't place. "You're the new applicant?" Victoria asked. "Yes, Ma," Grace replied nervously. "Name?" "Grace Miller." "Age?" 23, Ma. Victoria sat on a chair opposite her, crossing her legs. "Do you have experience?" Grace nodded. "Yes, Ma. I worked at the orphanage where I grew up. I cleaned, cooked, and took care of the children." "No parents?" Grace lowered her gaze. "No, Ma. I was told I was found as a baby at the church gate." Victoria's chest tightened, but she quickly hid her reaction. "And why do you want this job?" "To save money for school, Ma. I want to study nursing one day." For a moment, Victoria said nothing. Then she spoke softly, almost to herself. "Nursing, that's a kind dream." Grace smiled shyly. "Yes, Ma. I just want to help people. And maybe, make a difference." Victoria's eyes lingered on her face. There was something painfully familiar about that smile, that gentle tone. She felt her throat tighten. You seem humble enough. You can start tomorrow. You'll be in charge of the guest rooms and my study. Mrs. Adele will show you around." Grace's face lit up. "Thank you, Ma. Thank you so much." "Don't thank me yet," Victoria said coldly, hiding the warmth in her heart. "I have very high standards. If you're lazy or dishonest, you'll leave faster than you came." "Understood." "Yes, Ma. I'll never disappoint you." Victoria nodded. "You may go." Grace followed Mrs. Adele out, her heart dancing with joy. She turned briefly and smiled. Victoria looked away, pretending not to notice, but something about that smile stayed in her mind long after the girl had gone. Later that evening, Grace settled into her small room at the back of the mansion. It was simple but neat: a bed, a wardrobe, and a small window that opened to the garden. She sat on the bed and looked around in disbelief. "God, is this real? Am I really here?" She placed her locket on her chest and whispered, "Mama, wherever you are, I made it this far." At that same moment, in her luxurious bedroom upstairs, Victoria stood by her window, staring into the garden. She could see a small figure through the light. Grace, humming quietly as she arranged her things. Andrew entered quietly behind her. "Madam, you look thoughtful." Victoria turned. That girl. Grace. Something about her feels different. Andrew smiled. "Different, madam? How?" "I don't know. Her eyes. The way she speaks. It's as if I've known her before." Andrew chuckled. "Maybe she reminds you of someone." "Perhaps," Victoria said softly. "But I can't shake this feeling." He shrugged. "She seems humble enough. Maybe she'll last longer than the others." Victoria gave a faint smile. I hope so. The next morning, Grace woke up early. She swept, polished, and cleaned every corner of the guest wing before sunrise. The other staff watched her in surprise. One of them, Lydia, a cheerful cook, smiled at her. You're new, right? Yes. Grace. Welcome, my dear. Don't let Madam scare you. She's strict, but she pays well. Grace laughed softly. I'll try, thank you. When Victoria came down for breakfast, she noticed how spotless the hall looked. The air even smelled fresh. Who cleaned this place? She asked. Mrs. Adele replied, the new maid, Ma. Grace. Victoria raised an eyebrow. Good. Grace appeared from the kitchen, carrying a tray of tea and toast. She placed it gently on the table. Good morning, Ma. Victoria studied her again, her calm hands, her soft voice. Morning, she said curtly. Grace served quietly, her movements careful. Victoria watched her pour tea with precision, not spilling a drop. She was about to look away when she saw something that froze her. A small birthmark, just behind Grace's left ear. Her breath caught. That same mark had been on her baby's skin. The memory flashed so suddenly she almost dropped her cup. But she quickly composed herself. Grace noticed her expression. Ma, are you all right? Yes, Victoria said quickly, forcing a smile. Just a headache. Grace nodded. Would you like me to get you water, Ma? No. Thank you. For the rest of breakfast, Victoria said little. Her mind raced. Could it be possible? No, it couldn't. It was just a coincidence. Still, the image of that small pink baby with the same mark haunted her. After breakfast, she went to her study and sat silently, staring at the jewelry box on her desk. The locket glimmered in the morning light. She opened it and whispered, My child, wherever you are, forgive me. Downstairs, Grace was humming as she mopped the floor, the same tune she'd been singing since childhood, an old church lullaby that the orphanage matron used to sing to her. And strangely, in her study, Victoria found herself humming the exact same tune without realizing it. That evening, when Grace finished her chores, she walked to the garden. The sunset painted the sky orange and pink. She sat near the fountain, dipping her hand into the cool water. Andrew walked by and smiled. You seem to like the garden. Grace nodded. It's peaceful here. It reminds me of the orphanage yard. You grew up there your whole life. Yes. I never knew my parents. But the matron, Mrs. Brown, was good to me. She said whoever left me must have loved me once, because they left me with this. She held up her locket, old and scratched, but precious. Andrew leaned closer. That's beautiful. Do you know what's inside? Grace opened it carefully. Inside was a small faded photo of a woman's hand holding a newborn's tiny fingers. That's all there was, she said softly. I used to wonder who the woman was. Maybe my mother. Andrew smiled kindly. Maybe one day you'll find her. Grace looked at the sunset. Maybe. Unbeknown to them, Victoria stood at her balcony above, watching. Her eyes fell on the glint of the locket in Grace's hand. Something twisted inside her chest. She felt an ache she couldn't explain. She whispered to herself. That locket, it looks just like mine. She went back inside, trying to shake off the feeling, but her heart refused to settle. For years she had built walls around her pain. Now, somehow, this girl, this maid, was cracking them open without even trying. That night, Grace knelt beside her bed to pray. Thank you, God, for this job. Please bless Madam Hayes. She looks sad even when she smiles. Help me serve her well. In the room above, Victoria couldn't sleep. She sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the photo she had hidden for decades. She thought about Grace's quiet smile, the locket, the birthmark. It couldn't be true. It was impossible, wasn't it? No, she whispered. It can't be her. My baby is gone. But as she turned off the light, tears rolled silently down her cheeks. Somewhere deep inside her heart, a small voice whispered, maybe not. And as the mansion fell into silence, two hearts, one wealthy, one poor, beat under the same roof, unaware that fate had finally brought mother and daughter home. The first week in the Hayes mansion passed like a dream for Grace. Every corner of the house felt too grand to touch, yet she treated everything with care as if it all belonged to her own mother. She worked from sunrise till late evening, dusting the staircase rails, polishing furniture, and arranging flowers in every room. Whenever she passed Mrs. Victoria Hayes, she bowed her head politely, her heart thudding like a drum. Victoria rarely spoke to her. She would sweep through the corridors in elegant dresses, her perfume trailing behind her, leaving Grace half-awed, half-terrified. To Grace, Victoria was everything she hoped to become: strong, beautiful, and respected. But the woman's eyes carried a sadness Grace couldn't explain. One bright morning, Grace was scrubbing the living room floor when Victoria's heels clicked across the marble. "Victoria, you're here early." "Grace, yes, Ma. I like to start before the sun gets hot." Victoria paused, watching her polish the tiles with slow, careful strokes. "Do you ever rest?" Grace, smiling faintly. "I rest when the floor shines, Ma." Victoria, that's not a bad rule." Victoria walked away, but a small smile tugged at the corner of her lips. Andrew, the driver, who had been polishing the car keys nearby, caught it and raised an eyebrow. "Andrew, madam, you smiled." Victoria, coldly. "Did I?" Andrew, "Yes, Ma. The new girl must have said something good." Victoria, "Don't be ridiculous." Still, she turned once more toward the living room, where Grace hummed softly while she worked. Within days, Grace became the staff's favorite. She helped Lydia in the kitchen, washed dishes without being asked, and even shared her food with the guards. One afternoon, Lydia laughed as Grace kneaded dough beside her. "Lydia, you know, most new maids try to impress Madam by acting proud. But you're different." "Grace, I just want to do my job well." "Lydia, if only Madam could see your heart. She'd treat you like a daughter." Grace laughed, unaware how close those words were to the truth. "Grace, Madam already treats me well. She doesn't shout much." "Lydia, that's because she's still studying you. Madam doesn't trust easily." From the hallway, Victoria overheard the last line. She stood silently for a moment, unseen, watching the young woman work. There was a gracefulness in Grace's movement, a quiet confidence. She reminded Victoria of someone she once was, before life hardened her. Later that evening, Victoria sat in her study signing documents. Grace knocked softly at the door. "Grace, excuse me, Ma. May I come in?" Victoria, "Yes, come." Grace stepped in holding a tray with tea. "Grace, Mrs. Adele said you might like evening tea." Victoria, "Thank you. Leave it on the desk." Grace set it down carefully, then noticed a small picture frame on the table. In it was a photo of a teenage girl, Victoria's younger self. "Grace, you look beautiful in this picture, Ma." Victoria looked up sharply. Compliments were common, but this one felt sincere. "Victoria, that was a long time ago." "Grace, you still look the same." Victoria studied her face, the honest admiration in her eyes. For a brief moment she felt warmth, then quickly turned away. "Victoria, that will be all." "Grace, yes, Ma." As Grace closed the door behind her, Victoria exhaled heavily. That girl's voice, that simple kindness, it stirred something she thought she had buried long ago. That night, Victoria couldn't sleep. She walked to her balcony, looking down at the servant quarters where a small light glowed, Grace's room. She whispered to herself, "Why does that girl feel so close?" The wind carried no answer, only the soft echo of the same lullaby Grace often hummed while cleaning. Victoria frowned. She knew that tune, it was the one she had sung to her baby before she left her at the church door. Shaken, she stepped back inside and closed the balcony doors. "It's just a coincidence," she told herself. But her hands were trembling. Days turned into weeks, and Grace settled into her routine. The mansion no longer scared her. She learned every sound, the soft click of the master clock, the creak of the stairs, the hum of the air conditioner. But one place still made her nervous, Madam's study. Victoria's study was sacred ground. No one entered without permission. Mrs. Adele always warned, "Don't touch anything on that desk if you want to keep your job." That evening, heavy rain drummed against the windows. The other maids had gone to bed, but Grace stayed behind to finish dusting. The study door stood slightly open. She hesitated. "Grace," whispering, "I'll just tidy the books. It won't take long." She entered quietly, wiping the furniture and arranging the papers on the desk. Everything was neat except a small wooden box half covered by files. Curious, she reached out to dust it. As she moved the files aside, her elbow hit a photo frame. Crash! The glass shattered on the floor. Grace gasped and quickly knelt to pick up the pieces. Her heart pounded. "Oh no, what have I done?" As she bent to gather the shards, her eyes caught the open box on the desk. Inside lay a silver locket, shaped like a heart, shining under the desk lamp. Grace froze. It looked exactly like hers. Her trembling fingers lifted it gently. She turned it over, same pattern, same faint engraving around the edges. "No, it can't be," she whispered. Her eyes filled with tears. "Where did Madam get this?" She unclasped her own locket from her neck and placed it beside the one on the table. They were identical, like twins separated at birth. The door burst open. "What are you doing here?" Victoria said. Grace jumped, both lockets falling from her hands. She turned, terrified. "Grace, Ma. I'm sorry, I didn't mean." "Victoria, I told everyone never to touch my things. Were you trying to steal from me?" Grace, shaking her head quickly, "No, Ma. I swear I wasn't stealing. I was cleaning and I accidentally dropped the frame." Victoria strode forward, picking up her locket. Her voice trembled with anger and something else, fear. "Victoria, do you know what this is worth? Do you have any idea?" "Grace, I didn't touch it to steal, Ma. I only picked it because it looks like mine." Victoria blinked. "What did you just say?" Grace slowly took her own locket from her neck and held it out with shaking hands. "Grace, see? It's the same. I've had this all my life. It was left with me when I was a baby at the orphanage." Victoria stared at the two lockets. Her breath caught. For a split second the world stopped spinning. The same design. The same engraving. The same faint scratch at the side, she remembered it. She had made that mark the night she left her child. Her knees felt weak. "Victoria," whispering, "No, it can't be." "Grace, Ma?" Victoria turned away, hiding her face. Her heart pounded painfully. Could it be? Could this poor girl standing before her be the baby she abandoned? No, impossible. Too many years had passed. Too much coincidence. "Victoria," snapping, "suddenly put that back where you found it and leave my study." Grace, startled, "But Ma, I only wanted to show." "Victoria, I said get out." Grace's eyes filled with tears. She set the locket carefully on the desk and whispered, "I'm sorry, Ma. I truly didn't mean to upset you." She hurried out, her shoulders trembling. When the door closed, Victoria collapsed into her chair, staring at the two lockets on her desk. Her hands shook as she picked them up. She opened hers. Inside was the faded picture of a baby's tiny hand. She opened Grace's. Inside was the same picture. Her vision blurred. "My God," she whispered. "It's the same." The rain outside grew heavier. Victoria clutched the lockets, tears rolling down her cheeks. Memories flooded back. The night she gave birth, the shame, the fear, the sound of rain as she placed her newborn at the church gate wrapped in a pink blanket. "Victoria," to herself, "Grace, could it be you?" But reason fought against her heart. No. There must have been many lockets like this. It's only a coincidence. She wiped her tears quickly, trying to rebuild her walls. Yet the thought refused to leave. Downstairs, in her small room, Grace sat on her bed, crying quietly. Grace, to herself, why was she so angry? "I didn't steal anything." She looked at her locket, which she had managed to grab before leaving. "Why does Madam have the same one? What if?" She shook her head. "No, that's impossible." She lay down, but sleep would not come. Above her, in her grand room, Victoria also lay awake, both women separated by walls and years, yet sleepless for the same reason. The next morning, at breakfast, the air felt heavy. Grace served tea in silence, her eyes downcast. Lydia whispered, What happened? Madam looks like she didn't sleep. Grace only shook her head. Victoria barely touched her food. When Grace came near, her hand trembled slightly. She wanted to ask, "Who gave you that locket?" But fear sealed her lips. After breakfast, she called Andrew into her study. "Victoria, find out everything you can about that new maid, Grace Miller. Where she was born, what orphanage raised her, everything." Andrew looked surprised. "Madam, is there a problem?" "Victoria, just do it. I need to know who she is." When he left, she stared again at the two lockets, lying side by side on the desk. Her voice was barely a whisper. "If she is truly my daughter, what will I do?" Meanwhile, Grace worked quietly in the kitchen. Every sound made her nervous. She feared she might lose her job. Lydia tried to comfort her. "Lydia, don't worry. Madam gets angry easily, but she forgets quickly." "Grace, I hope so. I don't want to go back to the orphanage. I like it here even if Madam scares me sometimes." Lydia, smiling, she scares everyone. Grace forced a small laugh, but deep inside, confusion churned. Why did Madam's anger hurt her so much? Why did she feel as if she had disappointed someone important, someone she secretly longed to please? Later that evening, Grace was arranging flowers in the hallway when Victoria walked past. Their eyes met briefly. "Grace, good evening, Ma." "Victoria, good evening." Her tone was softer this time, uncertain, almost guilty. As she climbed the stairs, Victoria glanced back. Grace was still standing there, her face gentle, forgiving. A lump rose in Victoria's throat. She hurried upstairs before the tears could fall. That night, Victoria placed both lockets back into the wooden box, locking it tight. She looked at her reflection in the mirror. "If you are truly my child," she whispered, "how do I face you? How do I tell you that I left you?" Her voice broke. "No. It's better she never knows. She deserves peace." In her small room downstairs, Grace prayed before sleeping. "Lord, help Madam Hayes. She looks so lonely. Whatever hurts her, please heal it." Her words floated through the still night like a fragile thread of hope, one that unknowingly began to tie mother and daughter closer. The morning sun filtered gently through the tall glass windows of Victoria Hayes' mansion. Everything was spotless. As usual, the floors gleamed, the flowers were freshly changed, and the faint scent of lavender floated through the air. But one thing was different. Grace was missing from her usual duties. Victoria noticed it during breakfast. Her tea was too strong, the tablecloth slightly uneven, small things, but enough to irritate her. "Where is that girl?" she asked sharply, setting down her spoon. "She knows I don't like delays." Mrs. Nora, the head housekeeper, stepped forward hesitantly. "Madam, Grace hasn't been feeling well since last night. She tried to keep working, but I sent her to rest." Victoria frowned. "Rest? She just started a few weeks ago. If she's already falling sick, she might not last here." But despite her words, something tugged at her heart, a strange concern she didn't understand. Grace wasn't just another maid. There was something about that girl that kept echoing in her mind, her eyes, her voice, her quiet strength. Victoria sighed and rose from her chair. "Fine. I'll check on her." The staff exchanged surprised glances. Their madam never checked on anyone. Grace's room was small but neatly kept. She lay curled up on the bed, pale and shivering under a thin blanket. The sound of the door opening startled her. "Madam Hayes," she whispered weakly, trying to sit up. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to miss work. I just—" "Lie down," Victoria said curtly. She walked closer, the sharp click of her heels echoing on the tiles. "You look terrible. What happened?" Grace lowered her gaze. "Just a fever, maybe from overworking. I didn't want to disappoint you." Victoria studied her. There was sincerity in her voice, no trace of the excuses she usually heard from workers. "You should have said something," she murmured, her tone softening almost unwillingly. "You can't work yourself to death." Grace smiled faintly. "I'm fine, I'm stronger than I look." Victoria almost smiled back before catching herself. "Why do I care so much?" she thought. "She's just a maid. She reached for the wet towel beside the bed and gently placed it on Grace's forehead. Grace looked surprised. "Thank you, she whispered. "No one's ever done that for me before." Victoria froze. "No one?" She looked at the fragile young woman before her, so kind despite her pain. Something stirred deep inside, a warmth mixed with sadness. "Rest," Victoria said quietly. "That's an order." She turned to leave, but as Grace shifted slightly, her hair brushed aside, and that's when Victoria saw it. A small, faded birthmark just behind Grace's right ear. The exact same shape she remembered from years ago, like a tiny crescent moon. Victoria's heart stopped. She blinked hard, her pulse racing. "No," she whispered under her breath. "It can't be." Her mind flew back to the night she gave birth, the cries of a newborn in a dim hospital room, the nurse showing her that same mark before she signed the adoption papers. Victoria's hands trembled. She steadied herself on the wall, her throat dry. "You said, you grew up in an orphanage?" she asked suddenly. Grace nodded weakly. "Yes, since I can remember. They said my mother left me at the hospital." Victoria's breath hitched. Did they tell you her name?" Grace shook her head. "No, just that she was young, maybe scared." For a long moment, Victoria couldn't speak. Her eyes burned. Could it be? Could she really be mine? But she forced her emotions down. "I see," she said, her voice suddenly cold. "Get well soon. You can return to work when you're ready." Grace smiled faintly, unaware of the storm behind those words. "Thank you, You're very kind." Victoria turned and walked away, her steps unsteady. When she reached her room, she locked the door, pressed her back against it, and let out a trembling breath. Her mind wouldn't stop racing. That birthmark. The locket. The age. The orphanage. Everything lined up too perfectly. But she needed proof. Victoria grabbed her phone and called her private investigator, a man named Mr. Cole, who handled her personal affairs discreetly. "I need a background check," she said, her voice low and tense. "On one of my employees. Her name is Grace Miller. Find out everything, where she was born, who her parents were, where she grew up." There was a pause. "Yes, Is something wrong?" Victoria's tone turned sharp. "Just do it. And keep it quiet." As she hung up, she stared out her window, her reflection blending with the Lagos skyline. For the first time in years, she felt something she hadn't felt since that night long ago, fear. That evening, Grace slowly recovered. Nora brought her soup, and a few other maids stopped by with kind words. Yet, even in her sickness, Grace couldn't stop thinking about Victoria. There was something about that woman, a strange pull, a familiar feeling she couldn't explain. When Victoria looked at her, Grace felt warmth and pain at the same time. She whispered to herself as she drifted off to sleep, "Why do I feel like I've known her all my life?" Days passed. Grace regained her strength and returned to work, cheerful as ever. But Victoria was no longer the same. Every time she saw Grace dusting the furniture or humming softly in the kitchen, her heart ached. She wanted to ask more, so many questions, but fear kept her silent. "What if she really is my daughter?" she thought. "What if she hates me for what I did?" Victoria found herself staying up late, staring at old photographs, replaying memories she had buried for years. The young girl she once was, frightened and alone, forced to give up her baby to protect her future. And now, the same child might be under her roof. "God, what are you doing to me?" she whispered one night, tears slipping down her cheeks. 3 weeks later, the phone call came. Victoria was in her office, signing documents, when her phone buzzed. She saw the caller ID, Mr. Cole. She hesitated, her heart racing, before answering. "Tell me you have something." "I do, came his calm, professional voice. I traced Grace Miller's records. It wasn't easy, some files were incomplete. But I found her birth certificate." Victoria gripped the edge of her desk. "And she was born 23 years ago at St. Teresa's Charity Hospital in Ibadan. No father listed. Mother's name, Victoria Adams. That's your maiden name, The pen slipped from her hand. Her throat went dry. "Repeat that." Grace Miller is your biological daughter, Mrs. Hayes. The words hit her like thunder. For a moment, the world around her went silent. All she could hear was her own heartbeat, pounding violently in her ears. My baby, she whispered, her voice breaking. I found her. Tears welled in her eyes and rolled down her cheeks uncontrollably. She covered her mouth with trembling hands, her chest heaving with years of buried guilt. Are you all right? Mr. Cole asked gently. Yes, she managed to whisper. Thank you. Don't tell anyone about this. When she ended the call, she sat frozen for a long while. Her hands went to the drawer where she kept the silver locket, the twin of the one Grace found that day. She opened it and stared at the faded picture of a newborn baby inside. Then she broke down completely. She wept like a woman who had lost and found everything all at once. That evening, Victoria couldn't concentrate on anything. Her mind kept drifting to Grace, her daughter. Her child who had grown up without love, without comfort, while she lived in luxury. She felt crushed by shame. When she went downstairs, she saw Grace laughing softly with the other maids, holding a tray of teacups. The girl's eyes sparkled, her smile warm and sincere. Victoria stood there silently, watching her. That's my daughter, she thought. My own flesh and blood. Grace noticed her and immediately straightened. Good evening, she greeted with a polite smile. Victoria forced a nod. Good evening. You seem well again. Yes, much better, thanks to your kindness. Victoria almost broke down right there. She wanted to hug her, tell her the truth, hold her like she should have done 23 years ago, but fear stopped her. What if she can't forgive me? She forced herself to remain composed. Good, she said quietly. You've been doing a good job lately. Grace's eyes lit up. Thank you, That means a lot to me. Victoria nodded stiffly and turned away before her tears could betray her. That night, she sat alone in her study with the locket in her hand, whispering into the silence. My baby. I found you. After all these years. She looked toward the ceiling, her voice trembling. God, why now? How do I even begin to tell her? Will she ever forgive me for leaving her? The clock ticked quietly in the background as her tears fell one after another. Victoria opened a locked drawer and took out an old photo, the only picture from that hospital night. A teenage girl holding a tiny baby, her eyes red from crying. She pressed it to her chest. I'm so sorry, Grace. I was scared. I didn't know how to be your mother then. But I want to be now. The next morning, Grace knocked gently on Victoria's study door. You called for me. Victoria quickly wiped her tears and composed herself. Yes. Come in. Grace entered, her soft curls tied back neatly, her expression calm. How can I help you, Victoria hesitated, her heart pounding. She wanted to say it, to finally tell the truth. But when she opened her mouth, the words froze. She could only manage a strained smile. You've been very helpful around here. I wanted to, thank you. Grace looked surprised. Thank me? Yes, Victoria said softly. You remind me of someone I once lost. Grace tilted her head gently. I'm sorry, Someone close to you? Victoria nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. Very close. There was a brief silence between them, heavy, emotional, filled with something unspoken. Grace, sensing the sadness in Victoria's tone, said quietly, whoever she was, I'm sure she'd be proud of you. Victoria's lips trembled. You think so? Yes, Grace said with a warm smile. You're strong, elegant, and kind even if you hide it sometimes. That was too much for Victoria. She quickly turned away, pretending to arrange some papers. That'll be all for now, Grace. You can go. Grace nodded respectfully and left, her gentle footsteps fading down the hallway. As soon as she was gone, Victoria broke down again. She clutched the locket tightly and whispered through her sobs, You're right here, my love, and you don't even know. That night, as Victoria stared at the city lights outside her window, one thought kept echoing in her mind. I found my daughter, but how do I tell her the truth without losing her forever? And somewhere down the hall, Grace lay awake too, unable to explain why her heart ached every time she thought about her boss, like there was an invisible thread between them pulling tighter each day. The night was unusually quiet at the Hayes mansion. The air was thick with tension, something unseen but heavy. The staff had gone to bed, the lights in the corridors dim, leaving only the faint glow from Victoria's study. Grace couldn't sleep. Her thoughts had been restless for days. Victoria's strange behavior, her sudden mood swings, her long stares, her eyes that seemed to hold both love and pain, kept replaying in her mind. She often wondered, why does she look at me like that? That night, Grace went downstairs to get water. As she passed by Victoria's study, she heard voices. Normally, she would have walked away, but this time something in the tone made her stop. The door was slightly open. She could hear Victoria's voice, low, trembling. "I can't live like this anymore," Victoria said. "Every time I see her face, I see what I did 23 years ago." Grace froze. Her heart began to race. Inside, Victoria sat at her desk, speaking to Mr. Cole, her lawyer and old friend. Her makeup was smudged, her eyes swollen from crying. Mr. Cole sighed. "Victoria, you have to tell her the truth. Keeping it hidden will destroy you." Victoria shook her head. "How can I? How do I look into her eyes and say, I left you to die in the rain because I was too scared?" Grace covered her mouth, tears instantly flooding her eyes. What did she just say? Mr. Cole's voice softened. "You were 17. You were terrified. You made a mistake, but she deserves to know." Victoria's voice broke. "She will hate me, Cole. She will despise me for abandoning her like a stray. I saw her tiny hands that night, her little cry, and I still walked away. What kind of mother does that?" Grace felt her knees weaken. She pressed against the wall for balance, her breath coming in short, painful bursts. "Mother, she's talking about me." Victoria's words came again, thick with regret. "I left her at that hospital with only a locket. I told myself she'd have a better life. But I lied. I was just afraid of losing my reputation. And now, God has punished me. He brought her back into my house to remind me of what I did." Grace couldn't bear another word. Her heart shattered into pieces. She stumbled backward, tears streaming down her cheeks. The glass of water she held slipped from her hand and crashed onto the floor, shattering loudly. Inside the room, Victoria's head snapped toward the sound. What was that? She rushed out, opening the study door, but the hallway was empty except for the broken glass and a faint echo of hurried footsteps disappearing up the stairs. Grace's hands shook as she packed her small bag in the dark. Every tear that fell felt like a knife in her chest. The woman she admired, respected, and even loved like a mother, was her mother. But that mother had thrown her away. "She left me," Grace whispered through tears. "She left me in the rain." Her sobs echoed softly in the empty servants' quarters. How could she? She wiped her face roughly, her body trembling. "I can't stay here. Not another second." Grace slipped quietly through the back door, her heart breaking with each step she took away from the mansion. When the guards reported a missing maid the next morning, Victoria's blood ran cold. She rushed to Grace's room, only to find it empty, the bed neatly made, her small bag gone. On the table was a folded note. With shaking hands, Victoria opened it. "You should have told me the truth. You didn't just break my heart, you broke my soul. Don't look for me. Grace." Victoria collapsed onto the floor, clutching the letter to her chest. "No, no, no," she sobbed. "Not again." She ran outside barefoot, shouting Grace's name, her voice echoing across the compound. "Grace, please. Come back." But there was only silence. Mrs. Nora and the security men looked on helplessly as their boss crumbled before their eyes. Victoria dropped to her knees, her cries tearing through the morning air. "I found her only to lose her again," she whispered. "God, what have I done?" For the next 2 days, Victoria searched everywhere. She called orphanages, hospitals, police stations, anywhere Grace could have gone. She even offered a huge reward to anyone who found her. But Grace was nowhere. Inside her mansion, Victoria wandered the halls like a ghost. The rooms felt empty, lifeless. Her meals went untouched. Her reflection in the mirror looked hollow. In the silence, her own words haunted her. How can I tell her I left her to die in the rain? Each time she remembered that night, the storm, the baby crying in her arms, the guilt, the fear, it pierced her deeper. Flashback, 23 years ago. Rain poured heavily over the small hospital in Ibadan. 17-year-old Victoria sat on the cold bench outside, holding a tiny baby wrapped in a towel. The child's cry was soft but desperate. "I can't do this," young Victoria whispered, tears falling freely. "I have no money, no home. My parents will kill me." She looked down at the baby. "I'm sorry, my love. You deserve better than a mother like me." With trembling hands, she placed the baby near the hospital door, tucked the silver locket inside the towel, and whispered, "Forgive me." Then she turned and ran into the rain, her sobs lost in the storm. Back in the present, Victoria fell to her knees in her empty bedroom, clutching the same locket to her chest. "I thought I was saving her. I was saving myself." The rain began to fall again that night, soft and cruel, just like that night years ago. And somewhere across Lagos, her daughter was crying too. Grace found her way to a small neighborhood on the outskirts of the city. Tired and drenched, she knocked weakly on a familiar door. Mrs. Brown, the kind old woman who ran the orphanage, opened it. Her eyes widened in shock. "Grace, my child, what happened to you?" Grace burst into tears. "Mama Brown, I didn't know where else to go." Mrs. Brown hugged her tightly. "You're safe now. Come inside, my dear." Inside, Grace broke down completely. She told her everything, the mansion, the job, the locket, and finally, the truth she overheard. Mrs. Brown listened quietly, her face full of sorrow. When Grace finished, she whispered, "So, your mother, is Mrs. Victoria Hayes?" Grace nodded miserably. "The woman I trusted. The one I looked up to. She's the same person who abandoned me." Mrs. Brown took her hands gently. "And how do you feel, child?" Grace shook her head, tears spilling down again. "I don't know. Angry. Broken. I want to hate her, but I can't. She's my mother." Mrs. Brown sighed deeply. "Grace, forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting the pain. It means refusing to let it destroy you." Grace looked up through teary eyes. "How do I forgive someone who left me to die?" Mrs. Brown smiled sadly. "Because hate will make you just as lost as she once was. Forgive her not for her sake, but for your own peace." Grace's heart ached. "I don't know if I can." "You will, one day," Mrs. Brown said softly. "And when that day comes, you'll be free." Meanwhile, in the mansion, chaos had erupted. News had leaked to the media. Someone from the staff must have overheard or found out. Headlines. Lagos billionaire in scandal. Missing maid turns out to be secret daughter. Victoria Hayes' hidden past expose. Victoria's phone wouldn't stop ringing. Reporters camped outside her gates. Her business partners demanded explanations. Shares in her company dropped overnight. But none of that mattered to her. She sat in her room, pale and empty, staring at Grace's note on her nightstand. "She hates me," Victoria whispered. "And she has every right to." Nora entered quietly, holding a tray of food. Please eat something." Victoria shook her head. "What's the point? I have everything but the one thing I truly need." "Don't say that, You can make things right." Victoria turned her tear-stained face toward her. "How?" "She's gone." Nora hesitated. "Maybe, she's waiting for you to find her. Just like you waited all these years without knowing." Victoria's lips trembled. "But what if she never forgives me?" Nora took a deep breath. "Then keep trying until she does." At the orphanage, Grace stayed for several days. She helped the children with their meals, read them stories, and tried to smile, but inside, her heart was heavy. One evening, Mrs. Brown found her sitting alone by the window, staring at the rain. "You're thinking of her again," she said gently. Grace nodded. "I keep hearing her voice. The pain in it." She said she was punished for what she did. "I thought she was a monster, but now I'm not sure." Mrs. Brown sat beside her. "She's human, child. Humans make terrible mistakes. But love has a way of finding its way back." Grace turned to her. Do you think she really loved me? Mrs. Brown smiled kindly. She never stopped. That's why you're hurting. Because deep down, you know she's not a stranger, you carry her heart inside you. Grace wiped her tears silently. The next morning, one of the children came running to Mrs. Brown. Mama, there's a fancy car outside. Grace's heart skipped. She rushed to the window and saw Victoria's black Mercedes parked at the gate. Her breath caught. Mrs. Brown placed a hand on her shoulder. Looks like she found you. Grace's hands shook. I can't face her. Yes, you can, Mrs. Brown said softly. It's time. Outside, Victoria stood in the rain again, just like that night 23 years ago. Her hair was wet, her clothes clinging to her, but she didn't care. She only cared about one thing. When Grace stepped out of the door, their eyes met. Both froze, time standing still between them. Victoria took a trembling step forward. Grace. Grace's eyes filled with tears. Why? Why did you leave me? Victoria's voice cracked. Because I was young and stupid. Because I cared more about what people thought than about the life I brought into this world. And I have hated myself every day since. Grace's tears fell freely. You could have come for me. I didn't know how, Victoria whispered. I told myself it was too late. But when you walked into my life again, I saw God's mercy. I just didn't know how to ask for forgiveness. There was silence, rain pouring, hearts breaking. Grace looked at her mother, seeing both guilt and love in her eyes. Do you know what it's like to grow up thinking no one wanted you? Victoria nodded, sobbing. Yes. Because I didn't want myself either. Grace closed her eyes, shaking. I don't know if I can forgive you. Victoria took a small step closer, voice trembling. Then hate me if you must. But please don't walk away again. I can't lose you twice. Tears streamed down Grace's cheeks as she whispered, You already did. She turned and walked back inside, leaving Victoria standing in the rain, broken but somehow still hopeful. That night, Mrs. Brown sat with Grace again. You saw her pain, didn't you? Grace nodded slowly. Yes. For the first time, I saw not a rich woman, but a mother begging for mercy. Mrs. Brown smiled faintly. Then the healing has already begun. Grace leaned her head on Mrs. Brown's shoulder and whispered, Maybe someday, I'll be able to call her mom. But not yet. Mrs. Brown nodded. One day is enough. And outside, under the rain, Victoria knelt beside her car, whispering a prayer through her tears. Thank you, God, for giving me a second chance even if I have to wait a lifetime for her forgiveness. The rain had stopped that morning, but the sky still carried the memory of it, grey, heavy, quiet. Victoria sat by the window of her mansion, her once glamorous face pale and tired. Her hair, once perfectly styled, now fell in messy curls around her face. She hadn't gone to work in weeks. The company was running without her, but she didn't care. Nothing mattered anymore. Every corner of the house reminded her of Grace, the laughter in the kitchen, the soft humming while she cleaned, the warmth she had unknowingly brought into Victoria's cold home. She whispered to herself, voice trembling, I pushed her away again, my own child. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps echoed from the main entrance. Victoria's heart skipped a beat. The butler's voice came softly. Madam, there's someone here to see you. Victoria turned slowly. Her hands trembled. Who is it? Before he could answer, the door opened wider, and there she was, Grace. She looked thinner, but stronger. Her eyes were swollen from tears, yet peaceful. She stood in silence for a moment, staring at the woman who had given her life, and taken it away. Victoria rose slowly from her chair. Her knees felt weak. Her lips trembled as she tried to speak. Grace, she whispered, almost like a prayer. Grace didn't move. I didn't come to stay. I came to say what's in my heart. Victoria took a small step forward, then stopped, afraid she might break the fragile moment. Please, she whispered. Just say it. Anything. Grace looked around the mansion, everything polished, expensive, shining. Yet, all she saw was emptiness. I used to dream of having a mother, she began softly. Someone who would love me, protect me, tell me I was enough. And when I met you, I thought, maybe that's what you'd be. You were strong, and beautiful, and confident, everything I admired. But you were also cold, and I didn't understand why. Tears rolled down Victoria's face as Grace spoke. Grace continued, her voice trembling. When I found out the truth, I hated you. I hated myself for loving you. I couldn't understand how a mother could abandon her baby. But then I remembered everything I saw in this house. You weren't happy. You were surviving. You built walls to hide your pain. Victoria's sobs broke the silence. She took another trembling step closer. I was 17, she said in a broken whisper. A scared girl who made a terrible choice. My parents forced me to give you up. They said a baby would destroy my future, destroy the family name. But Grace, I never stopped thinking about you. I never stopped hating myself. Grace's voice softened. Why didn't you tell me when you found out? Victoria sank to her knees, crying. Because I was afraid. I thought you'd never forgive me. I thought I didn't deserve you. Grace's eyes filled with tears. Maybe you didn't, she said quietly, but you're still my mother. Victoria looked up at her, completely undone. Grace, I don't deserve your forgiveness. Grace knelt down slowly in front of her. She took Victoria's shaking hands into hers. I can't erase the past, she said softly. But I can love you from here. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Grace reached forward and wrapped her arms around Victoria. It was the embrace they had both waited 23 years for. Victoria sobbed into her daughter's shoulder, whispering, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Grace held her tightly. It's okay, Mom, she whispered. It's over now. In that quiet moment, surrounded by tears and forgiveness, the cold mansion finally felt warm again. Later that evening, they sat together in the living room. The sunset poured golden light through the windows. Victoria looked at her daughter. You know, she said with a faint smile, I used to imagine what my little girl would look like. I never imagined she'd be this brave. Grace smiled shyly. And I never imagined my mother would be this beautiful. They both laughed softly, awkward, fragile, but real. Victoria reached out and tucked a strand of Grace's hair behind her ear, noticing again the tiny birthmark there. You even have your grandmother's eyes, she said fondly. Grace took her mother's hand and squeezed it. Maybe now we can start over. Victoria nodded slowly, tears glistening again. Yes. No more lies. No more walls. And for the first time in decades, Victoria Hayes slept that night without guilt weighing on her heart. She had lost everything that mattered, but she had found what truly did, her daughter. A year later, the city of Lagos was buzzing with excitement. Billboards and news headlines carried the same message. Grand opening, Grace Homes Foundation, giving every child a second chance. The once private Victoria Hayes now walked proudly beside her daughter, Grace, as they arrived at the new building's entrance. The foundation was beautiful, white walls, open gardens, and a playground filled with laughter. Children ran around in uniforms that bore the logo Grace Homes. Grace smiled, her eyes sparkling with joy. They're so happy, she said softly. Victoria watched her with pride. You made this happen, Grace. You turned your pain into something beautiful. Grace shook her head. No, we did. You gave me the chance to dream. The media surrounded them, microphones ready, cameras flashing. A reporter called out. Mrs. Hayes, is it true your company funded this project? Victoria smiled gently, no longer the cold businesswoman she once was. Yes, she said. But the heart behind it belongs to my daughter. Grace blushed, looking down shyly. Another reporter asked, why name it Grace Homes? Victoria looked at her daughter lovingly. Because Grace saved me, she said softly. I once built an empire from pride. Now, I'm rebuilding one with Grace. Applause filled the air. The cameras flashed brighter. But for Victoria and Grace, the world around them disappeared for a moment. They walked hand in hand through the building, showing guests the new dormitories, classrooms, and art spaces. Children hugged Grace's legs, calling her Auntie Grace. She knelt to hug them back, smiling. One little girl, maybe 7, tugged at Victoria's dress. Are you her mommy? she asked innocently. Victoria smiled warmly and nodded. Yes, sweetheart. I am. The little girl grinned. She's lucky to have you. Victoria's eyes filled with tears as she whispered, No, darling. I'm the lucky one. Later, in the Foundation's garden, the two women sat together under a tree. The wind carried the sound of laughter from the children nearby. Grace leaned back and sighed. You know, I used to hate the rain. It reminded me of the night I was left outside the orphanage. Victoria reached for her hand gently. And now? Grace smiled softly. Now I love it. Because that night brought me to where I am today. Victoria's eyes glistened. You're stronger than I ever was, Grace. Grace looked at her mother, her voice calm and full of love. I'm only strong because I know what it means to be broken. A soft silence fell between them. Then Grace said quietly, Do you ever think about what life would have been like if we had never met again? Victoria's lips trembled. Every day. And every time I think about it, I thank God for giving me another chance. They smiled at each other, tears in both their eyes, but this time, they were tears of healing, not pain. As the sun began to set, Victoria stood and faced the small crowd of journalists and guests gathered in the garden. She took the microphone and spoke with a clear, emotional voice. Life has a strange way of teaching us what matters, she said. I thought success would fill the emptiness inside me. I thought wealth would silence my guilt. But the truth is, no amount of money can replace love. No empire is greater than the one built on forgiveness. She turned toward Grace, her voice trembling with pride. My daughter taught me that. She taught me grace, not the word, but the heart behind it. Grace stood beside her, holding her hand. And my mother taught me that broken people can still build something beautiful, she said softly. The crowd applauded. Cameras flashed. Victoria leaned close to her daughter and whispered, Thank you for not giving up on me. Grace smiled through tears. Thank you for finding me. As the ceremony ended, the clouds opened gently, and a light drizzle began to fall. Children laughed and danced in the rain, their joy echoing through the courtyard. Victoria and Grace didn't run for shelter. Instead, they stood together, letting the rain wash over them, just like that night, 23 years ago. But this time, there was no abandonment, no loss. There was only love. Victoria looked up at the grey sky and whispered, Maybe the rain isn't a curse after all. Grace smiled. No, Mom. It's a blessing. They embraced again as the rain fell softly around them, two souls once broken by the same storm, now healed under it. The camera flashes caught the image, the powerful businesswoman and the young woman who had once been her maid, now standing as mother and daughter. And as the world watched, they smiled, no longer haunted by the past, but hopeful for the future. Because sometimes, grace is not just a name. It's a miracle. Please don't forget to hit the like button, comment and subscribe. Your support, it's what keeps these stories alive. Thank you for watching and stay tuned to get more interesting stories like this.